Hi guys, I am back with another video. This is going to be a continuation, a part 2 of my childhood. So as previously stated in the other videos, my parents were very young when they got married, and I did not grow up with a lot of money. Contrary to what a lot of my social media followers believe, I guess their perception of me may be a little different of what I'm about to get into right now. I did not grow up with money. My family struggled to pay the bills. My family struggled to even keep food in the house. And saying that to say, things aren't always what they seem to appear to be. So I know what it's like to struggle, not only as a child, but throughout my adult life. I know what it's like to not have and to go without and to be without. I grew up in a home where my father had to work 3 jobs, barely even had time to sleep. Some of those jobs we as little children used to go and help him with. There were times where people in our church had to come by and buy my family groceries because we didn't have food in the house. I grew up on a set time to eat. Not because we didn't have food, sometimes we didn't, but most of the time to make it stretch. So I had a time to eat breakfast. I had a time to have a snack, lunch, and then dinner. If I was to go and ask my parents to have something to eat, because that's something that I had to do, we couldn't just go into the kitchen and get some food. I had to ask to eat something. And if I was to ask in between any of those times that I was supposed to eat, it was usually a no. Growing up like that, and to be able to look back at that, you kind of have this humbling spirit. I know I do. To know what it's like to come from that to where I am now is very humbling. Growing up like that, a lot of the times, when we would go to our friend's house, and to see how they live, and they had all this food, and to just eat whatever they wanted to eat. It was, for myself and my sisters, it was like, we didn't know how to kind of react and act. So whenever we did go to other people's homes like that, if we were invited, we would eat so much because we knew when we get back home, we weren't gonna have that. So embarrassing enough to say, we would do that. We would look forward to going and being away from the home so that we can actually go and, our friends had, snacks, they had good food and they had all this stuff, and we would go to eat as much as we could and then go back home, and then, we'd be back to our normal way of living. And we would do this when we went to families' homes too. It was like our aunts and uncles' home and things like that, and I don't think it was too much noticeable to them. I know it was noticeable to several of my my aunts. But that's how I grew up. As you know, I also said that, we grew up as Jehovah's Witnesses. So I know growing up in this religion in the 80s and 90s, it's way different than what it is now. But growing up in that religion, it was very strict. It made our household very strict as well because of the rules that we had to abide by because of this religion. So, you know, this religion then told you what to basically, or guided you, however you want to say it. Everybody that was not a Jehovah's Witness, anybody outside of that religion was not to be associated with outside of either work or school. So growing up as a child, we weren't allowed to associate with our friends that we had in school outside of school. So we couldn't go to their houses, they couldn't come to our house and play. We also could not, as children in school, we could not join any extracurricular activities. So my sisters and I were very, very good athletes in school. When it came to track, when it came to any sports really, volleyball and basketball, we were really good. And every time we wanted to join a team, or either when the coaches at the school wanted us to participate and join in these teams, we couldn't. And my parents would always tell us no. And it was a lot of times where the coaches approached my parents to have us join a particular activity in school, and my parents will tell them no because we were Jehovah's Witnesses. It was just something that we could not do. So I remember, being a Jehovah's Witness and being in school, it was embarrassing for us just because a lot of the things that we could not participate in and do was because we were Jehovah's Witnesses. And it was really never an explanation given of why. It was just because we were Jehovah's Witnesses, and Jehovah's Witnesses didn't do that. The most basic thing that that they say that the reasoning why we don't do a lot of these things is if it had anything to do with the holidays, it was just because it was paganistic. It was pagans. Of course, that's a stupid answer right now, but that's the answer that was always given to us. But if it was anything other than that, as far as, sports, extracurricular activities, stuff like that, it was just because we were Jehovah's Witnesses and we don't do what the other people do, which is basically they don't want you around people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses. That was just it. And growing up, I remember being smaller, and as a Jehovah's Witness, you're not allowed to say the Pledge of Allegiance as well. So I remember I had to be like in first grade or so, and whenever the kids would stand up to say the Pledge of Allegiance, I had to either just sit down or I had to stand up and not say it and just stand still. I did that for quite some time and was very embarrassed because the kids would always look at me, or they would always say, why aren't you saying the pledge? And, I didn't have an answer. I was in first grade, I was little, so I really didn't have an answer. The only thing I would have to say was, I'm a Jehovah's Witness, and even that was embarrassing for me. I remember one day I went to school and I literally was like, I'm gonna say the Pledge of Allegiance and I don't care. So I remember going to school and saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and it had, been some time, several weeks, I guess, I was doing this. And I remember after school, my teacher stopping my mom to speak to her. And right off the bat, I already knew, for some reason, I already knew what she was telling her. So I knew she was telling her I was saying the Pledge of Allegiance. So as I stood there and waited for my mom as she spoke to my teacher, my mom turns around and just gives me this glare. And from there, I just knew. I was just like, she told her, and now I'm going to go home and get the beating of my life. And I kind of laugh about it. It's my way. You guys will kind of notice that in these videos. I laugh a lot when I talk about stuff that is uncomfortable. But I do remember going home, and my mom, on the way home, as we walked home, my mom was just, saying, "Oh, so you're saying the Pledge of Allegiance?" And I didn't know really what to say. And she was just like, "Don't worry, I'm gonna tell your father, and you're gonna get it. You're gonna get it when you get home." So, I'm scared. I'm small. So I already knew the beatings. I already know what these beatings are going to be like. So I'm scared. And, I get home, and of course, I get beat very badly. And then I just remember my father coming and speaking to me with the Bible open, and he's reading like Bible verses. And, I'm small, I'm in first grade, I'm like, all I understood was I'm not supposed to say this pledge. But, I have my mom, she's beating me, and then my father, he's reading a Bible verse to me, And so this was like, this is what I had to endure, as a child, doing something that was against your parents and against a religion, So that was one instance. Being in this religion as well, you're made to go to their church like 3 times a week. When I was smaller, of course it's changed now, but when I was smaller, it was 3 times a week. I think I remember the days: Tuesday, Thursday, and Sundays. And each of these times, these services were like 2 to 3 hours long. 3 hours long. Sometimes it would be 4 if it ran over. And as little kids, it's very hard to keep their attention. Their attention span is everywhere. So it's very hard for them to keep your attention and sit down for 3 hours, let alone 1 hour, but 3 hours. But we were made to sit, and I remember I was sitting down with my family as the service was going. I remember looking behind me in between the chairs, and I was saying hi to another little person, my friend or whoever it was. I was saying hi and smiling and playing, and my mom, she jerks me around and tells me to sit forward and stop. And so I did it again. I looked behind me and was saying hi. And all I remember is I get jerked around. And my mom had this thing where she would do to my sisters and I. She would take our ear and she would twist it. So I remember when she jerked me around to face forward, she took my ear and she twisted it, and she was twisting, and I didn't even know, it didn't feel like it was ever going to stop. Like, it hurt so bad. And I just remember about to like scream because it hurt, but she was just like, you make one sound. And so I remember after a couple minutes when she let go, it felt like my whole entire face was like on fire, and that my ear had its own heartbeat, because you know how you feel the pulse. That's how bad it was. It was like pulsating from my face. But I was so embarrassed because the people behind me saw it, and I don't even think I ever looked back that entire time, but it was so embarrassing. But that's the type of stuff that she would do to us. Instead of trying to hit us in public, she would do stuff like that. My mom would also, like in these church services, they have like a question and answer part, and they would want, if you knew the answer, you would raise your hand and they would give you a microphone so that you can speak in front of the whole congregation. So I remember, we're smaller, and I remember my mom would always highlight things for us to say, to comment, so that the mic would come. But we were always I can't speak, I know my sisters were as well, but I was always so nervous, just like how I am making these videos. I was always very nervous public speaking. And also I was nervous because I didn't really pay attention and I wasn't really retaining the information to answer a question. So when I'm answering these questions, it's just something that she's telling me to say and highlighting to say. And most of the time I don't even hear the question. So I remember this one time she told me to raise my hand and I didn't want to raise my hand. And she was like, she was forceful. Like she would make us raise our hand. So I raised my hand and I remember the mic coming to me and she's showing me what to say. But I literally freeze up to where I couldn't say anything. And I didn't know, and I was just so confused. I didn't know what to say. I was so nervous that I couldn't say nothing. So they just moved on to the next person. But I remember she was so upset. Like she wouldn't even look at me. And then, as a child, I'm thinking, you just embarrassed her or you just disappointed her. So I was trying to tell her I'm sorry and I'll do it again. I'll try and do it again and answer another question. And she was like, forget about it. Just forget it. And then she would always, this is something that she would always do to us. She would always say how good everybody else's children were. So when another person or other kids would answer these questions in church, she would always say, see, look at them. Look at how they're answering the questions. Look at how they're speaking. Look how good they speak. Look how good they read. They're gonna be going somewhere in life. Look at them. Their parents. They don't need any help. They don't need any help doing anything with their reading, or they don't need to be told what to do. And so this made of course, children. This makes you feel small. Makes you feel really inadequate. And this is what she would do on a daily, not even just at church, but just every day, all the time. When we had different friends that we went to school with, she would do that a lot. So a lot of my childhood was from her. If it wasn't physical, it was verbal. It was always comparing me and my sisters to other children. Look at how they're doing. Look what they're doing. They're going to go somewhere in life. They're not like how you guys are. It was nothing ever positive from her. Still to this day, as an adult, there's nothing positive that comes from her. I don't even think I'm thinking now. I don't think there's ever been a time that she's ever told me that she's proud of me or anything positive. It's always something negative, always something wrong, always the opposite of something good. Growing up with that, it affects you emotionally and mentally, And I think about myself as an adult, the things that I struggle with today are because of the things that I had to endure and go through as a child. And it can no longer be swept under the rug, A lot of us struggle with things that sometimes we don't understand why we struggle with it until we look back and actually do the work on ourselves, Sometimes you get to a point in life to where you can no longer go forward. Life won't even let you go further until you address the issues of the past. If you don't address it, you stay stuck. And, I think that's where I am in my life, I hit a point in my life to where I can no longer ignore the elephant in the room. Which is I have a major problem. I have an anger problem when it comes to my mother. And this is how I want to deal with it, is speaking about it. So I hope you guys can, you know, relate, some of you, you know, and just know that if this message is for you, it's for you. This is your time to face yourself and to face what you've been putting on the back burner for so long. Because if you don't face it now, it's going to come to a head later on. And you know, mine did. Mine definitely smacked me in the face. So I will end this video here, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. I'm going to enjoy mine, and I am sending you guys love and light.